Folks, we are just a week and a half away from the regular season, and there are some game changers at the wide receiver position. We already covered the 5 receivers who are being drafted above their value, and as a result, you should make sure to avoid them. But here's how I have the top 30 ranked in a PPR format as we roll into 2023. We'll kick it off with Justin Jefferson. There isn't too much we have to say here, but we'll validate his value anyway. Justin Jefferson, he set the record for the most receiving yards through a player's first 3 seasons at 4,825. Jefferson saw a career high in receptions and receiving yards last year as he eclipsed the 1,800-yard mark. He's also the greatest receiver in today's game without much of a debate at all. Beyond him, there's some controversy at the 2 spot. Ja'Marr Chase is who I'm going with at that 2 spot. He had a minor setback, missing 5 games in 2022, but he still put up a 1,000-yard season and was on pace to outdo his rookie year numbers, which were quite impressive. He actually had more receptions in 2022 despite playing in 5 less games, so the target share went up significantly. He's playing for a top 5 quarterback in Joe Burrow in a loaded passing attack. Burrow was one of just 5 quarterbacks to throw the ball over 600 times last year, so I believe, especially with a healthy Ja'Marr Chase, the volume will be there. Tyreek Hill is number 3. It's funny that even with how dynamic Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes were together in Kansas City, they each set career highs in yards. Patrick Mahomes with a career high in passing yards and Tyreek Hill with a career high in receiving yards. Hill's open field speed is just bonkers. He had almost 500 yards after catch last season. That's top 15 in the league, along with his buddy in Jalen Waddle. He's reliable too. Knock on any nearby wood if you have Tyreek Hill on your team, because I'm going to say it, he hasn't missed a game in 3 seasons. No complaints here with this elite receiver. Cooper Kupp is behind him to wrap up the S tier. He's arguably got the second highest upside of anybody here. I'd still say Justin Jefferson has him beat in that department, especially when you consider the age of these 2 receivers. Cooper Kupp averaged north of 10 targets per game for the second year straight, and in just 9 games, the man cleared 800 receiving yards in 2022. He has missed a decent chunk of time in 2 seasons across his career. He's obviously 30 years old, but Matthew Stafford's consistent effort to push the ball in his direction is too much to kick Cooper Kupp out of the top tier. Let's go to the 8 tier, and we'll begin with Stefon Diggs at number 5 overall. Stefon Diggs has been the only 1,000-yard receiver in Buffalo over the course of the last 3 years since he showed up. Before him, it was John Brown in 2019, but since he has shown up, just Diggs. Gabe Davis has been the wide receiver too, and I say that with quotes because, as was mentioned with him before, he doesn't take up a huge chunk of opportunity away from Diggs. He barely catches half of his targets. Gabe Davis is 118 for 218 when you look at receptions against targets throughout the first 3 years of his career. And even so, he hasn't had a 100-target season yet. Plenty of rooms for Diggs to operate. CeeDee Lamb is at number 6. I think CeeDee Lamb has all the opportunity in the world to rise up this list even more than at number 6. With Tony Pollard presumably getting more snaps, I expect him to take more of a prominent place in the pass-catching game for Dallas, but I still see another elite season happening here for Lamb. Lamb has improved in receptions, yards, and touchdowns in each of his first 3 seasons, and now he steps right into his prime with, say what you want about Dak Prescott, a quarterback who has historically thrown for right at 250 yards per game. A.J. Brown is number 7. A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts were a match made in heaven last season. Even with a run-heavy offense and a fellow 1,000-yard receiver in Devonta Smith, Brown had a career year across all fronts. He's somebody I have seen fall to the 2-3 turn depending on the size of your league, and I'm a big fan of stacking him with Hurts on that turn if you are someone who has a quick turnaround there. Davante Adams is at number 8. Davante Adams comes off of honestly the most perfect season a fantasy fan could have asked of him. He led the league in target share with a mark of 32.3% while gelling with his former college teammate in Derek Carr, just like everyone who had an opinion said he would. The competition for targets was also non-existent. Hunter Renfrow went down, Darren Waller missed half the season, and Mac Hollins barely had half the targets that Davante Adams did. Jimmy G is in town now, Jacoby Myers joins the wide receiver room, and I just don't see Adams outdoing last year's numbers. Garrett Wilson is in prime position to outdo last year's numbers. He's here at number 9. He somehow managed to log 1,100 yards and crack the top 25 in fantasy PPR wide receivers last season, with Zach Wilson, Mike White, 2022 Joe Flacco, and Chris Streveler throwing him the ball. Very impressive. With that being said, I'm very excited for Aaron Rodgers, who made comparisons between Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams in training camp, to give this guy a chance to show off his ceiling. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown at 10th overall. Amon-Ra St. Brown took off in the second half of his rookie year, that was back in 2021, and kept the momentum moving into last season. He was 8th in the entire league in total targets, but the reason I've got him plateauing right at this fringe top 10 mark is the fact that he hasn't been used much down the field. His 11 yards per reception mark from last year is well below the surrounding receivers in these top tiers. Nonetheless, with TJ Hawkinson gone and a new backfield, the opportunity here remains. Speaking of big plays, Jalen Waddle is in 11th on this list after his league best 18.1 yards per reception among qualifying receivers in 2022. Waddle made up for lost volume with those big plays last season, but behind Tyreek Hill and with an injury-prone QB in Tua at the helm, the ceiling tapers off around the top 10. Next is Amari Cooper, honestly one of the most underrated receivers in the entire league. Despite the fact he trudged through a run-heavy offense with Deshaun Watson putting up by far the worst year of his career projected across 17 games, Amari Cooper set a career high with 9 touchdowns and was just 29 yards short of setting his career high in receiving yards. Watson will now be a Week 1 quarterback for the first time in 3 seasons, and even with Elijah Moore in town, I expect the improved QB play to keep Amari Cooper in the top 12. Chris Olave is another diamond in the rough, as the Saints had QB changes between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton last year. Derek Carr comes in averaging 24 touchdowns and 4,000 yards per season, which is about what we saw out of the Saints last year, but consistency under center helps for sure. On top of that, remember that Alvin Kamara is suspended for 3 games, and Michael Thomas playing a full season is anything but promised. Look for Chris Olave to do better than he did last year, which wasn't bad. 1,100 yards as a rookie, I'll take it. To start off the C tier, we've got the wide receiver 1 in Seattle in DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett turns 31 in September, and I'm not too ready to play the age card yet, considering he actually saw an increase in targets, catch percentage, and touchdowns in his 30-year-old season this past fall. Then you have Jackson Smith-Njigba stepping in, and even though he just had wrist surgery, he'll miss the first couple of weeks at most. Outside of Miami, T. Higgins is arguably the best established wide receiver 2 out there, and I say established because of the next guy behind him. We'll get to him in a second. He's got a pair of 1,000-yard seasons alongside Jamar Chase and has consistently seen north of 100 targets each year. Number 16, I'm cautiously placing Calvin Ridley. We can look at the training camp footage, preseason tape, and the scenario in Jacksonville on paper all the heck we want. The fact of the matter is this. The guy hasn't played in an NFL regular season game in nearly 2 whole years. Yes, he had a 1,400-yard season a couple of years ago under Matt Ryan, who was honestly a similar QB prototype to Trevor Lawrence early on, but this guy needs to play some football before I can justify taking him early in the 3rd round, which is a spot I have seen him go at way too often. Devonta Smith rounds out the C category and is a perfect example of a receiver defying his environment with flat-out improvement. The Eagles are a run-heavy squad and got A.J. Brown after Devonta Smith's rookie year? No problem at all. Smith got more opportunities and capitalized with a 200-yard increase. DeAndre Swift is a receiving back, but he's had some injury issues throughout his career so far, so I'm not sure how much he takes away from the upside of Devonta Smith. Let's go to the D tier, now for another preseason hype monster in DJ Moore. Moore broke free for a couple of 40-plus yard plays in preseason, and everyone lost their minds. Many of you are probably thinking, Corey, you just made the same exact argument with Calvin Ridley, yet this guy has actually played in the last 2 years. Why is he below Ridley? Completely true, completely fair argument, but I believe there's a bit of a drop-off in passing production from Trevor Lawrence to Justin Fields in the most run-heavy offense in the league. Look, if the offensive line can stay healthy and be productive, and Fields takes another step forward going into year 3, Moore should be 1,000-yard season bound. Christian Watson is right after him. Watson had a rise to stardom similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown in that he got more reps and took off in the second half of his rookie season. There's a new QB in town in Jordan Love, and I do think there will be an initial reliance on the veteran backfield and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, but I think Love gets the keys to this offense at some point and immediately looks to Watson. In 20th, I have Deebo Samuel. I said in the prior video that I don't hate Deebo Samuel. I just feel the fact that he's nearly being drafted inside the top 15 of wide receivers is unbelievable. That's because Christian McCaffrey came in last season, arrived in San Francisco, and immediately neutralized Deebo Samuel's fantasy production. Nonetheless, a wide receiver with open field speed and involvement in the backfield like Samuel is hard to ignore, so we've got him at 20. Brandon Ayuk, another reason I am selling on Deebo Samuel this year, is right behind him at number 21. After having in the ballpark of 1,500 receiving yards over the course of his first 2 seasons combined, Ayuk took another leap forward and put up 1,000 yards last year. The guy gets praise from his teammates, is making blocks down the field that most wide receivers aren't, and looks to be getting rewarded for that extra effort, not to mention he has statistically gotten better every single year. Keenan Allen is 31 years old, not to mention he had a nagging injury that kept taking him out. He also has to compete with the best pass catching back from last year in Austin Eckler, who racked in 107 receptions. Mike Williams and Joshua Palmer continue to be more and more involved in this offense. Nonetheless, it's Justin Herbert who can throw for 5,000 yards and spread the ball around. I think he'll be relatively okay. Just think he's a little overrated in terms of his ADP. Starting off the eats here, we have Christian Kirk. Kirk is somebody I feel like everyone just stopped talking about once we received news that Calvin Ridley would be back and at 100% in Jacksonville. I can assure you that Christian Kirk is still very much a high-caliber wide receiver. Look, he's in the middle of a 4-year, $84 million contract, so the Jags invested in this guy. Not to mention, Christian Kirk was 5th in the NFL among receivers in red zone targets last year with 22 of them. Terry McLaurin isn't in the best offense, but he's on this list because the run game was honestly pretty bad in Washington last year. Brian Robinson Jr. and Antonio Gibson engaged in a not very competitive battle for the starting back spot, both averaging less than 4 yards per carry. So yes, Jahan Dotson showed out down the stretch last year, but McLaurin is riding on 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. I expect this team to lose a lot of games, meaning Sam Howell will be throwing a ton in the second half, trying to make up a deficit, and essentially giving McLaurin some targets and receptions in garbage time. Mike Williams is a big, downfield target. He's exciting. He was the best among Chargers receivers with over 14 yards per reception. But his 2022 didn't come without injuries as well. He is just as susceptible as Keenan Allen when it comes to Austin Eckler poaching his receptions, but I digress. It's Justin Herbert. He'll spread the ball out. After Williams, we've got Chris Godwin. While I am well aware that Mike Evans is listed as the official wide receiver 1 in Tampa Bay's depth chart, numbers do not lie. Chris Godwin has had more targets in each of the last 2 years than Mike Evans, despite playing in 2 less total games than him. Russell Gage is out for the season after leading this team in red zone targets last season, so there's touchdown upside there for Godwin. The 2 question marks on this offense will be Baker Mayfield and the health and overall production of that offensive line. Now on to the F tier, still guys who could very well crack your starting lineup, even in a 12-team league, DeAndre Hopkins. I thought about leaving him off of this list, but when you look at guys like Tyler Lockett and Keenan Allen, who are the same age but have had less successful careers than Hopkins, it's tough to. This is a run-heavy scheme that Hopkins is stepping into, and I'd imagine after drafting a quarterback in the 3rd and 2nd round in the last 2 years, Tannehill's job isn't exactly safe, but it's DeAndre frickin' Hopkins. We'll just have to see. Deontay Johnson is someone who I'd consider to be under the radar. He was 7th among all receivers in total targets alongside guys like CeeDee Lamb, but less than 2/3 of the passes thrown in his direction were catchable. It was 95 out of 147 that he was actually going to be able to rack in. He also had no touchdowns and went through a QB change halfway through the year. If he gets his usual dosage of around 140 targets in a season and Kenny Pickett improved at all, which from the preseason it looks like he did, watch out. Drake London is at number 29, and he's in a tough spot. He's on a team that ran the ball 57% of the time last season and then got the top running prospect in this year's draft in Bijan Robinson. Atlanta is committed to pounding the rock. London's 4.54 40-yard dash time is something that still concerns me considering we don't know the whole story on Desmond Ridder yet. Ridder also ran the ball 500 plus times in college, as we mentioned in the 5 receivers who you should avoid drafting video. I just think a lot is going to have to go Drake London's way for him to crack the top 25. Jerry Jeudy rounds out our top 30 wide receiver rankings. Obviously, he can easily work his way into the lower 20s, but it's all about availability at the end of the day. The best ability is availability. And as we learned last season, this poor offense is not helping him out at all. Personally, if Jerry Jeudy is on my team, I'm hoping for one of 2 things. Russell Wilson either shows out or we get a chance to see what Jared Stidham can do. Thank you so much for watching. As always, your support is very much appreciated. Make sure you drop any questions that I was unable to answer in the comments section below. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe if we helped you in any way, shape, or form, and we will see you in the next one.